A life that never sees the sun, never knows human contact, surrounded only by the shadows of the guards. One of the most notorious criminals in El Salvador is held under these conditions in a high-security prison called CECOT. A man who is not allowed the slightest contact with other inmates, living in isolation as harsh as the crimes he committed in the past. So who is this prisoner? And what are the crimes he committed that made the authorities separate him completely, even from the rest of the criminals?
Peace be upon you, did you know, viewers?
Describing CECOT as just a prison is not enough. It is a massive fortress designed from the ground up to be a security center aimed at isolating the most dangerous criminal in El Salvador, completely cut off from the outside world. This place, which was built during the presidency of Nayib Bukele, has only one goal: to eliminate the power of the gangs that have sown terror in the streets for years, taken control of neighborhoods, and tightened their grip on people's daily lives. In other words, CECOT was not created just to detain criminals, but to dismantle the criminal system from within. Behind the fortified walls made of concrete and steel, the main figures of criminal organizations that have existed in the country and turned it into a nightmare for years are held. These are not ordinary prisoners. They are the people at the top of organizations that seized control, caused the deaths of innocent people, and made the population live in a constant atmosphere of terror. Usually, everyone in a place like this is considered extremely dangerous, but even in CECOT, there is a name that changes the balance. Here begins the part of the story that gives you chills. There is someone among the prisoners whose name makes everyone who knows him tremble, because this person is not just a prisoner locked inside like the others. His influence in the past, his reputation, and the fear he created are still alive. The authorities' isolation of him, even from other gang members, is not just a simple measure, but indicates a special level of danger. So who is this person? And what did he do to the extent that his presence with other inmates in a high-security prison was considered dangerous? The story of this criminal who is described as the worst of the worst. And even in CECOT, it's not just a criminal record, but one of the clearest examples of how El Salvador's war against gangs and the state's strict methods have reached this point. Now we come to the fundamental question that the authorities see as a threat of this magnitude. There are many hardened criminals in CECOT, but there is one name that stands completely apart from the rest. Because this person is not just a gang member, but someone who carried out some of the darkest gang acts to the point that people lower their voices when they hear his name. We are talking about Miguel Antonio Diaz-Rabier, a member of the Mara Salvatrucha gang, and known to everyone as Castor. This nickname is not just an alias, but a brief summary of the fear he left behind. Castor was not just a tough member, he had authority and influence within the organization. He was a name that carried weight. This power was not only evident on the streets, but was also clearly reflected in the records of violence documented in his files. This is why he was classified as a special threat. Beyond being someone who committed crimes, Castor was a name known for running criminal operations, giving orders, and carrying out executions in cold blood. One of his biggest cases tops the country's agenda. It was one of the most horrific events in the modern history of El Salvador. Castor was sentenced to 269 years in prison for his involvement in the killing of 4 armed forces soldiers. This sentence alone is harsh, but the matter doesn't end here. Investigations revealed that, in addition to being an active member, he played the role of the hitman, meaning the person who carries out assassinations for the gangs. He identifies people who are considered a threat to the organization and orders killings when necessary. For this reason, the state's response was not ordinary. The authorities clearly realized that the danger posed by someone like this might not end even after he is imprisoned. Because an influential leader can issue orders from behind bars, build networks, and direct people. This is considered one of the greatest risks in gang structures. So a radical decision was made to cut off Castor's communication with other inmates and isolate him completely. The goal was clear: to prevent him from showing strength, issuing orders, and imposing control even inside the prison. But how did Castor reach this state? And how did he become one of the most terrifying criminals in the country? Where did the chain of events that forced the authorities to impose harsh isolation begin? Where did the harsh events begin? The darkest point in this story starts with an incident that happened in 2016. 4 young soldiers from the Salvadoran army were riding a minibus, thinking they were having just another ordinary day, just a trip, but in reality, it was the end of their lives. At the same time, something else was happening in the area. Castor and a cell belonging to Lam C. 313S enforce a chain, and they have one rule: so no vehicle passes through the area randomly. Every vehicle is stopped and everyone is searched, and on that day, that bus was stopped. The 4 soldiers were just young men doing their duty, but that didn't make any difference to the gang. What mattered to them was control and terror. And at that moment, everything changed. The soldiers were kidnapped, and from that moment on, there was no way back. Castor was not just involved in the event. He was the one who made the decision for the execution. The soldiers were transported handcuffed to an abandoned area, and there, in a place where no one could hear or see them, they were mercilessly killed. The bodies were buried in pits they dug themselves. Their phones were smashed and thrown down the slope. This event caused a huge shock throughout the country, and people were terrified. But what was astonishing is that justice was not served immediately. Despite that, Castor and his men disappeared for years and continued to live without being arrested. Because he didn't just have a gang behind him, but a system built on fear. This system kept them untouchable for a long time. During this period, the families of the 4 soldiers not only bore the pain of losing their sons, but also carried the burden of questions that remained unanswered. What happened? Who did it? Why can't they be found? These questions remained relentless for years, and this is where the story deepened even more, because this incident was not just a murder, but one of the clearest examples of how gangs became a force in El Salvador. The years passed, and Castor and his men disappeared. They were not caught, and their trail was lost. However, something changed in El Salvador. The state of emergency declared by President Nayib Bukele completely changed the rules of the game. The state was no longer retreating, it accelerated. Operations against the gangs intensified and expanded in scope. The people who had been hiding for years started getting arrested one after another. It wasn't just a security operation, it was a complete rebuilding of the entire system. Finally, it was Castor's turn in 2022. He was arrested in his hideout in San Sanico. For someone who had managed to evade capture for years, the run was over. Finally, he was detained and put on trial, and the process went faster than expected. The court sentenced him to 269 years in prison. This sentence was not only about the killing of the 4 soldiers, but there was a much darker past behind it. But what really caught our attention was what happened after that, because the state did not treat Castor as an ordinary prisoner, but assessed him in a completely different way. The authorities knew that someone like that could remain dangerous even behind bars. He could give orders, direct people, and influence the gang's structure from the inside. So the decision was clear. Castor was not placed in the same location as the other prisoners. He was sent directly to CECOT, and there he didn't just face punishment, but severe isolation commensurate with the crimes he had committed. Because the punishment in this story is not just the loss of freedom, but complete neglect and total isolation. Now we come to the truly terrifying aspect of CECOT. The issue here is not just locking the door, but severing a person's connection through isolation, and this is exactly what Castor is experiencing. 4 concrete walls, complete absence of sunlight, 0 human contact. There is no one except the eyes of the guards. Only the eyes of the guards. And the authorities want this deliberately, because Castor is a name that has influence inside MS-13. And it is believed that there is a possibility he could build his fearsome profile outside, with his network inside the area as well. So it's not enough to isolate him from the other prisoners, but they completely cut off his speech, communication, and contacts. He is not even allowed to approach anyone, not even from his own organization. For him, there is no conversation inside, no one complains, no show of strength, just complete silence, cold walls, and the sound of those thoughts that eat away at a person from the inside. But this is just the beginning. The conditions in CECOT are harsh to begin with, and deliberately so. There is no bed, no pillow, no sheets. Prisoners sleep on iron platforms in their underwear, with only a shirt. In winter, the cold clings inside the cell, and the only thing that protects you is the heat your body produces. It is said that the system applied to Castor is even harsher, as some privileges are completely denied. It is said that the food portions are reduced for disciplinary reasons, and if food is available, a fork and spoon are considered a simple luxury. Rice, beans, boiled eggs, and a little pasta, that's all. And on some days, he talks about the possibility of not serving food at all as a punishment inside the cell. He sends another message. It is like a cage made of concrete and philosophy, with 2 sinks and a toilet that everyone can see. There is no privacy, and nothing that can be called humane living. No books, no TV, nothing to occupy the mind during the day. If he gets permission and is lucky, he can walk and exercise in the corridor for 30 minutes, but he doesn't see the sun because this building is designed to make you forget the outside world and its affairs. A fact that Castor knows is that this is not a temporary measure, but rather 269 years. It means there's no way out of here, no hope that the door will ever open one day, and no expectation of ever seeing the sky outside. CECOT's goal is to make the prisoner feel exactly this. Whoever enters loses all control, and Castor realizes that his story hasn't ended here, but has entered an endless loop inside the house. The breaking point and the truth in CECOT begin in a person's mind before their body. Because what exhausts you here isn't just the walls, but living the same day over and over again. Castor's life has become a single loop, the same silence, the same corridor, the same footsteps. There is no sound except for the guard's footsteps, and over time, this sound turns from emptiness into pressure. The cell is specially designed for this purpose. No windows, no sunlight, no sign of the outside world. The only light inside is from fluorescent lamps that never go out. That means the brain has no answer to the question, is it day or night? Here, time breaks down. No clock, no mirror, not even a reflection where you can see yourself. Days blend together, minutes stretch out, and hours become meaningless. After a while, a person realizes this. You feel like time isn't passing, but in reality, it's taking something from you. The goal of this system is to strip Castor of his identity as the authority figure completely, not just to isolate him from the prisoners. For someone who can also give orders, direct people, and create fear, the greatest punishment is that no one listens to him anymore. Imagine that people used to tremble for years at the sound of his name, and now no one answers him, no one talks to him, and no one listens to him. This means gradually erasing identity, and it goes beyond physical punishment. This erasure is not limited to the internal system only. No visits, no family or acquaintances, no letters come, and the phone doesn't ring. For the outside world, Castor no longer exists. He is alive, but he is completely erased within the system. Sometimes even this isn't enough, so he's moved to even tighter spaces, places so small that it's hard to move. Here, silence is no longer just silence. It becomes a weight that enters a person's mind. Thoughts grow louder and echo, and there's nowhere left to escape. This is where the real power of CECOT lies. It doesn't just lock you in, it leaves you alone with yourself. And sometimes that's the hardest thing for a person. The story of this isolated prisoner remains a symbol of a violent era in El Salvador's history, where fighting crime turned into an all-out war. Trapped between justice that brought him down and harsh isolation, its effects begin to show. The question remains open. Is this model of harsh punishment a permanent solution? Or is it just a chapter in a story that has yet to end?